The gymnasium echoed with the sound of running feet and bouncing balls, a cacophony that Zara had grown to dread. She positioned herself at the edge of the basketball court, her serpentine lower body coiled beneath her as she watched her classmates warm up for another session of what the humans called physical education. The irony wasn't lost on her that this class, designed to celebrate physical prowess, had become her daily reminder of everything she couldn't do. Zara belonged to the Nithara species, beings whose evolution had favored mental acuity over physical mobility. Her people had transcended the need for limbs millions of years ago, developing powerful telekinetic abilities instead. But here at Galactic Academy Station, surrounded by dozens of species who could run, jump, throw, and catch with natural appendages, her abilities felt more like a cruel joke than a gift. "All right, settle down." Coach Tremor's voice boomed across the gymnasium. The Thurian's massive frame cast a shadow over the assembled students as his forearms gestured for attention. "Today we're doing relay races. I want you all in teams of 4. The familiar knot formed in Zara's stomach as students immediately began gravitating toward their friends. She watched as the quick-footed Zalarians paired with athletic humans, while the powerful Draconian students formed their own intimidating group. Within minutes, nearly everyone had found their place, leaving Zara floating awkwardly near the wall. "Looks like the Snake Girl's all alone again," snickered Vex, a particularly unpleasant draconoid whose scales seemed to shimmer with malice. "Maybe she can slither to the finish line." A few students chuckled, though most had the decency to look uncomfortable. Zara kept her expression neutral, having learned long ago that showing pain only invited more cruelty. She began to turn toward Coach Tremor to ask if she could sit this one out, as had become her routine. "I'll be on her team." The voice cut through the ambient noise of the gymnasium like a blade through silk. Every head turned toward the source, a human boy named Marcus Chen who had transferred to the station just 2 weeks prior. He was average height for his species, with dark hair and calm brown eyes that seemed to assess everything around him with quiet intelligence. Coach Tremor's eyebrows rose slightly. "Very well, Chen. Anyone else want to join them?" Silence stretched across the gymnasium like a held breath. Zara felt heat creep up her neck as dozens of eyes focused on her, some filled with pity, others with barely concealed disdain. She wanted to tell Marcus he didn't need to sacrifice his grade for her sake, but something in his steady gaze stopped her. "I'll join too," came another voice. This time it was Kira, a Zalarian girl with crystalline skin that caught the light beautifully. She stepped forward with fluid grace, her usual group of friends looking shocked at her decision. "And me," added June, a quiet human boy who rarely spoke but always seemed to be watching everything with sharp attention. Coach Tremor nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Team formation complete. Now this relay will test your speed, agility, and teamwork. Each team member must complete one leg of the course, which includes running to the far wall, retrieving a ball, dribbling it through the obstacle course, and passing it to the next teammate." Zara's heart sank. The course might as well have been designed specifically to highlight every limitation her physiology imposed. She couldn't run in any conventional sense, had never successfully dribbled a ball, and her telekinetic abilities, while precise, operated at a fraction of the speed that natural limbs could achieve. As the teams huddled to discuss strategy, Zara found herself surrounded by her unexpected teammates. She expected them to politely suggest she take the easiest position, or perhaps find some way to minimize the damage her participation would cause to their collective performance. Instead, Marcus surprised her by asking, "What's your maximum telekinetic range and precision?" The question caught her off guard. Most people, when they bothered to ask about her abilities at all, focused on what she couldn't do rather than what she could. About 15 meters for fine manipulation, 30 for gross movement. "I can maintain precision down to millimeter accuracy within 10 meters. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, his eyes scanning the relay course with new interest. "Reaction time? Nearly instantaneous for objects within my field of awareness." "Interesting." He turned to Kira and June. "What if we don't run the course the way everyone else does?" Kira's crystalline features shifted into a frown of confusion. "What do you mean?" "The rules say each team member has to complete one leg, but they don't specify that we have to run it in the traditional order or method." Marcus's lips curved into a slight smile. "What if we designed a strategy that plays to all our strengths instead of forcing everyone into the same mold?" Zara felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in months of PE classes. Hope. You're suggesting we work as an actual team rather than four individuals taking turns? Exactly. Marcus looked around their small circle, his enthusiasm beginning to infect the others. Kira, you're the fastest runner here. June, you have the best hand-eye coordination I've seen. Zara, your telekinetic precision is probably better than anyone's physical dexterity. And he paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. I'm good at seeing patterns and timing. Around them, other teams were already lining up at the starting line, confident in their conventional approaches. Vex caught Zara's eye from across the gymnasium and made an exaggerated slithering motion with his arm, causing his teammates to laugh. So what exactly are you proposing? June asked quietly. Marcus began to outline his plan, speaking quickly but clearly. As he talked, Zara felt her perspective shifting. For the first time since arriving at the academy, someone was looking at her abilities as assets rather than limitations. More than that, Marcus seemed to understand that true teamwork meant more than just taking turns. It meant finding ways to combine different strengths into something greater than the sum of its parts. The plan was audacious, possibly against the spirit if not the letter of the rules, and would require perfect timing and coordination. It was also, Zara realized with growing excitement, completely brilliant. Coach Tremor's whistle pierced the air. Teams to your starting positions. As they moved toward the line, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced since her first day at the academy. The possibility that she might actually contribute to her team's success rather than simply trying to minimize the damage of her participation. Whatever happened in the next few minutes, Marcus had already given her something precious, the feeling that she belonged. The starting line buzzed with nervous energy as 8 teams prepared for Coach Tremor's signal. Zara positioned herself according to Marcus's plan, her heart hammering against her ribs with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. She had never been part of a real strategy before, never felt like an integral component rather than a liability to be managed. Remember, Marcus whispered beside her. This isn't about proving them wrong. This is about proving ourselves right. The wisdom in his words struck her immediately. He wasn't asking her to compete against the prejudices of others, but to compete alongside teammates who believed in her capabilities. The distinction made all the difference in the world. Coach Tremor raised his whistle. On your mark. Get set. The sharp blast echoed through the gymnasium and chaos erupted as the first runners from each team sprinted toward the far wall. Vex launched himself forward with typical Draconoid aggression, his powerful legs carrying him ahead of the pack. Other runners followed in a blur of motion, each focused on reaching their objective as quickly as possible. Marcus began his run at a measured pace that seemed almost leisurely compared to the others. Several spectators in the bleachers began to murmur about the human's apparent lack of urgency. What they couldn't see was the precise timing behind his seemingly casual approach. As Marcus reached the halfway point, Zara extended her consciousness forward, feeling for the ball that would soon be within her range. Her telekinetic senses swept across the collection of spheres waiting at the far wall, identifying the one that would become her responsibility. The plan required split-second timing and absolute trust between teammates. The first runners reached the wall and grabbed their balls. Vex snatched his with characteristic brutality and immediately began charging back toward the obstacle course, dribbling with heavy, powerful strikes that sent the ball bouncing high but efficiently forward. Marcus reached the wall several seconds behind the leaders, but instead of immediately grabbing a ball, he paused for a heartbeat. His eyes found Zara across the gymnasium, and he gave an almost imperceptible nod. This was the moment everything depended on. Zara reached out with her telekinetic abilities, grasping the ball that Marcus had positioned himself near, but instead of waiting for him to physically carry it back, she began moving it herself, sending it floating through the air in a direct line toward the obstacle course. Gasps echoed through the gymnasium as spectators realized what was happening. The ball moved with impossible smoothness, following a trajectory that no thrown or carried object could achieve. It sailed over the heads of other runners, past the traditional boundaries of the course, directly toward where Kira waited at the first obstacle. Is that legal? Someone shouted from the bleachers. Coach Tremor's eyes were fixed on the action, his expression unreadable. The rules stated that each team member had to retrieve a ball and navigate it through their section of the obstacle course. They said nothing about how the ball had to travel between sections, or whether teammates could assist each other's movements. Marcus, meanwhile, had begun jogging back toward his teammates, his part of the traditional course abandoned in favor of their coordinated strategy. Some of the other teams began to realize something unusual was happening, but they were too committed to their own approaches to adapt. Kira caught the telekinetically guided ball with fluid grace as it settled gently into her hands. The first obstacle was a series of low barriers that required ducking and weaving while maintaining control of the ball. Her crystalline physiology gave her natural flexibility, and she flowed through the course like liquid light. But even as she moved, Zara was already extending her abilities to assist. The ball seemed to anticipate Kira's movements, staying perfectly positioned even when a traditional dribble would have sent it bouncing away. To observers, it looked like Kira had suddenly developed supernatural ball handling skills. "This is incredible," breathed Dr. Yalan, the Academy's xenobiology professor, who had stopped by the gymnasium to speak with Coach Tremor. They're functioning as a true symbiotic unit rather than competing individuals. Vex completed his section of the course and passed his ball to his next teammate, maintaining a solid lead despite the unorthodox approach of Marcus's team. His confidence was evident in every stride, certain that his team's superior individual athleticism would carry them to victory. He had no understanding of what he was truly competing against. Kira finished her section and tossed the ball toward June, but Zara's telekinetic touch ensured it traveled in a perfect arc, landing precisely where June could catch it without breaking stride. The quiet human boy had been studying the obstacle course's final section with intense concentration, and his preparation showed immediately. The last part of the course required threading the ball through a series of hanging rings while maintaining forward momentum. Most students approach this by carefully aiming each throw, accepting the time penalty in exchange for accuracy. June took a different approach entirely. He began running full speed while Zara maintained telekinetic contact with the ball. Together, they turned the obstacle into a fluid dance. June would initiate each throw with natural timing and force, while Zara provided minute course corrections that ensured perfect accuracy. The ball seemed to defy physics as it curved through rings that should have been impossible to hit at such speed. The gymnasium fell silent except for the sound of running feet and bouncing balls. Every eye was fixed on the impossible coordination being displayed by the unlikely team. Students who had spent weeks dismissing Zara as the useless snake girl watched in stunned amazement as she demonstrated abilities that transcended anything they had imagined possible. Marcus reached the final exchange point just as June completed the last obstacle. The ball settled into his hands with the gentle precision of a landing butterfly, and he began the final sprint toward the finish line. But by now, other teams had begun to realize they were witnessing something special. Vex's team was still ahead, but their lead was shrinking with every second. More importantly, the crowd was no longer cheering for the traditional favorites. "Go, Snake Girl," someone shouted from the bleachers, and Zara felt a shock of recognition that the voice belonged to a student who had previously ignored her completely. Marcus crossed the finish line 3 seconds behind Vex's team, placing them solidly in second place. But as Zara looked around the gymnasium, she realized that rankings had become irrelevant. Students were approaching her with expressions of genuine curiosity and respect, asking questions about her abilities and complimenting the team's strategy. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Zara felt like she belonged. The academy's cafeteria buzzed with conversation during lunch period, but today the usual social hierarchies seemed different. Zara found herself at the center of attention in a way that felt entirely foreign. Students who had previously pretended she didn't exist were now approaching her table with genuine curiosity. "How did you make the ball move like that?" asked Lyra, a Centaurian girl whose 4 legs had always made her one of the faster runners in their class. It looked like it was alive. Zara carefully set down her nutrition supplement, still adjusting to being the focus of positive attention. Telekinesis operates on electromagnetic manipulation of molecular structures. What you saw was precise control over the ball's trajectory using focused mental energy. "That's incredible," Lyra breathed. "I never realized your abilities were so sophisticated." Marcus, sitting across from her with Kira and June, smiled quietly at the exchange. He had been fielding his own questions about the strategy they had employed, but Zara noticed that he consistently redirected credit back to the team's collaborative effort. The real breakthrough wasn't my telekinesis, Zara explained to the growing group of listeners. It was Marcus recognizing that we could combine our different strengths instead of forcing everyone to compete in identical ways. Vex approached their table with his usual swagger, though something in his expression seemed less certain than before. His scaled features were arranged in what might have been meant as a friendly smile, but his eyes held the calculating look of someone reassessing a situation. That was some pretty clever rule-bending back there, he said, his tone carefully neutral. I'm impressed you found a way to make your limitations work for you. The casual insult wrapped in false praise was exactly the kind of backhanded compliment Zara had learned to expect from Vex. But before she could formulate a response, Marcus stood up from his seat. Actually, Vex, I think you're misunderstanding what happened, Marcus said calmly. Zara doesn't have limitations. She has different capabilities that require different strategies to utilize effectively. Your team won today because you're all physically similar and could employ conventional tactics. But imagine if you had to compete in a telekinetic precision contest, or a problem-solving relay that required mental rather than physical agility. Vex's eyes narrowed slightly. Physical prowess is what matters in physical education. That's literally the point, is it? Marcus asked. Or is the point to learn how different beings can work together effectively? Because that seems more useful for the real world we're all going to face after graduation. The conversation around them had grown quiet as other students tuned into the exchange. Zara could feel the tension building and wished Marcus would simply let the matter drop. Confronting Vex rarely ended well for anyone, but Kira surprised everyone by speaking up. Marcus is right. I've been thinking about what we did today, and it's actually more applicable to real life than traditional competition. When I graduate and start working in interspecies commerce, I'm going to need to coordinate with beings who have completely different capabilities than mine. Exactly, added June quietly. Most of the challenges we'll face in our careers will require collaboration between different species with different strengths. Today's exercise was actually more realistic than individual competition. Vex looked around the circle of faces, clearly outnumbered in a debate he had expected to dominate. His pride was evident in the set of his shoulders and the way his scales seemed to darken with agitation. Fine, he said finally, but don't expect special treatment to become the norm. Next time we compete, it'll be individual performance that matters. After he stalked away, the atmosphere around the table relaxed considerably, but Zara found herself troubled by his parting words. She had experienced one moment of belonging, one instance where her abilities were seen as valuable rather than limiting. Was it realistic to expect that feeling to continue? He's not entirely wrong, she said quietly. Most physical education activities are designed around individual performance. Today was an exception because Coach Tremor allowed creative interpretation of the rules. Marcus leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Then maybe we need to help create more exceptions. What if we could demonstrate that collaborative approaches consistently produce better results than pure individual competition? How would we do that? Kira asked. By volunteering for every team activity, requesting permission to form mixed ability groups, and proving that diverse teams outperform homogeneous ones. Marcus's eyes had taken on the same calculating look they'd held when he was designing their relay strategy. We make ourselves indispensable by being genuinely more effective. The idea was ambitious and appealing, but Zara couldn't shake her concerns. That assumes Coach Tremor and the other instructors are open to non-traditional approaches. Most educational institutions prefer standardized methods. Most educational institutions haven't had the opportunity to see what we demonstrated today, June pointed out. Results have a way of changing minds. Over the following days, Zara began to notice subtle changes in how other students interacted with her. The complete invisibility she had grown accustomed to was replaced by cautious curiosity. Some students still avoided her, but others made genuine efforts to include her in conversations and group activities. The change was most evident in their next physical education class. When Coach Tremor announced that they would be doing team-based obstacle courses, Zara braced herself for the familiar experience of being chosen last or having to ask to join a group. Instead, she found herself with multiple options as students actively sought her participation. Zara, want to team up with us? Called out Finn, a human boy she had barely spoken to before. "We could really use your precision abilities," added Naya, an Aquarian whose water-based physiology usually kept her separate from land-based students. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Zara had choices about her participation rather than simply accepting whatever arrangement would have her. The sensation was both exhilarating and slightly overwhelming. She ended up joining a mixed group that included 2 humans, an Aquarian, and a being from the crystalline Gef species. As they planned their approach to the obstacle course, Zara found herself naturally falling into the role of strategic coordinator, helping identify how each team member's unique abilities could be best utilized. The exercise went smoothly, with their collaborative approach earning them a solid 3rd-place finish. More importantly, Zara felt genuinely useful throughout the entire activity. Her teammates listened to her suggestions, valued her input, and treated her as an equal contributor rather than a burden to be accommodated. But even as she enjoyed the new dynamic, she couldn't help wondering if this acceptance was sustainable or simply a temporary novelty that would fade once the excitement of their relay innovation wore off. 3 weeks after the relay race, Zara's newfound acceptance was put to its first real test. The annual Academy Olympics were approaching, a week-long competition between different class sections that determined bragging rights for the entire academic year. Unlike regular PE classes, the Olympics involved serious training, strategic team selection, and considerable social pressure to perform. Zara sat in the back corner of the assembly hall, listening as Coach Tremor explained the various events and selection process. Her stomach churned with familiar anxiety as she realized that this competition would likely revert to traditional individual performance standards. The collaborative approaches that had served her well in recent classes wouldn't translate to standardized Olympic events. Each class section will select their best athletes for each event, Coach Tremor announced. "We want our strongest runners for the sprints, our most agile students for the obstacle courses, and our most coordinated individuals for the precision events." Around her, students were already beginning to whisper about who would make the team. The same names came up repeatedly: Vex for strength events, Lyra for distance running, Kira for agility competitions. Zara's name was notably absent from every conversation. After the assembly, she was gathering her materials when Marcus appeared beside her. His expression was thoughtful in the way she had learned meant he was developing a plan. "The team selection meeting is tomorrow," he said, without preamble. "Have you considered volunteering for any events?" Zara almost laughed at the suggestion. "Which event would I volunteer for? The one where I can't run, can't jump, can't throw, or can't catch?" "The Precision Telepathy Relay," Marcus replied immediately. "It's a new event this year, designed to test mental coordination between team members. Perfect for someone with your abilities." She had heard about the telepathy relay but assumed it was intended for species with natural telepathic abilities. "I'm not telepathic, Marcus. Telekinesis and telepathy are completely different neural processes. But telekinesis requires the same kind of focused mental projection and environmental awareness that telepathy uses," he insisted. "Plus, the event allows for one non-telepathic team member who acts as a coordinator and interpreter." Despite herself, Zara felt a flicker of interest. "What exactly does the event involve?" Marcus pulled out his datapad and showed her the official rules. The Precision Telepathy Relay required teams of 4 students to navigate a complex obstacle course, while blindfolded, using only mental communication to coordinate their movements. The twist was that only 3 team members could be telepathic, while the 4th served as a mental anchor who could provide guidance and stability. The key is that the anchor needs to understand spatial relationships and movement patterns well enough to help coordinate the team's actions, Marcus explained. "Your telekinetic abilities give you exactly that kind of environmental awareness." Zara studied the rules more carefully, her scientific mind automatically analyzing the challenge. The coordination requirements are significant. Each team member would need to maintain mental contact while processing complex spatial information and physical navigation. The anchor would need to serve as a processing hub for multiple information streams. Exactly. And I happen to know 3 students with telepathic abilities who are looking for an anchor. Before Zara could ask who he meant, she found herself surrounded by familiar faces. Kira had approached with 2 other students Zara recognized but had never spoken to directly. Dex, a Mindari whose species was known for powerful telepathic abilities, and Echo, a human with rare psionic gifts. We've been talking about forming a team for the telepathy relay, Kira explained. But we need someone who can serve as our coordination point without getting overwhelmed by multiple mental voices. Telekinetic awareness operates on similar principles to telepathic reception, Dex added, his mental voice carrying a warm tone that his physical vocal cords couldn't produce. Your mind would be naturally compatible with our communication methods. Echo nodded enthusiastically. Plus, your precision abilities would help us navigate obstacles that require exact positioning. We've all seen what you can do when you're working with a team. Zara felt the familiar mixture of hope and fear that had become associated with new opportunities. The logical part of her mind recognized that this could be another chance to demonstrate her value as a team member, but the emotional part of her remained scarred by months of exclusion and mockery. What if I'm not good enough? She asked quietly. What if my abilities aren't compatible with telepathic coordination? This is the Academy Olympics, not a regular class exercise. Marcus sat down beside her, his expression serious. What if you are good enough? What if this is exactly the kind of challenge your abilities were designed for? You'll never know unless you try. Besides, Kira added with a smile, worst case scenario, we don't place well in one event. Best case scenario, we discover something amazing about how different mental abilities can work together. The team selection meeting the next day was held in Coach Tremor's office, with representatives from each class section, presenting their proposed teams for various events. Zara found herself sitting nervously between Marcus and Kira as they waited for their turn to present their telepathy relay proposal. When their moment came, Dex served as spokesperson, explaining their reasoning for choosing Zara as their anchor despite her lack of traditional telepathic abilities. He outlined the theoretical basis for telekinetic telepathic compatibility and described the practice sessions they had already begun conducting. Coach Tremor listened with his characteristic stoic expression, occasionally asking technical questions about their proposed approach. Several other students in the room seemed skeptical, particularly Vex, who had apparently been hoping to place one of his friends in the event. This is supposed to be a telepathy competition, Vex interjected. Using someone without telepathic abilities seems like cheating. The rules specifically allow for one non-telepathic anchor, Echo pointed out calmly. We're not breaking any regulations. But you're not following the spirit of the competition either, Vex pressed. This event was designed to showcase telepathic coordination, not telekinetic substitution. Zara felt her cheeks burn with familiar shame. But before she could withdraw her application, Marcus spoke up. Actually, I think this team perfectly embodies the spirit of the competition, he said firmly. The whole point of the Academy Olympics is to demonstrate how different species and abilities can work together effectively. What's more representative of that ideal than a team that combines telepathy with related but distinct mental abilities? Coach Tremor held up a hand to forestall further debate. The selection committee will review all applications and announce team rosters tomorrow. Until then, I suggest all proposed teams continue their preparation. As they left the office, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that she had once again put herself in a position to be publicly rejected. The Academy Olympics were too important, too visible, for the administration to risk on an unproven experiment. But that evening, as she practiced coordination exercises with her potential teammates, she began to understand what Marcus had seen in their collaboration. Her telekinetic awareness did mesh naturally with their telepathic communication, creating a mental network that felt both foreign and perfectly natural. The team roster announcement drew the largest crowd Zara had ever seen in the Academy's main corridor. Students pressed against the display boards, searching for their names among the various event listings. Zara hung back from the crowd, her nerves making it impossible to push forward and look for herself. Marcus returned from the boards with an expression she couldn't read. For a moment, her heart sank as she prepared for the familiar disappointment of rejection. Then his face broke into a wide grin. "Congratulations, Anchor," he said, showing her his data pad where he had photographed the telepathy relay roster. Her name was listed clearly. Zara Nithis, Mental Anchor. The relief was so overwhelming that she felt dizzy. Not only had she been selected, but the official designation of Mental Anchor gave her role a sense of importance rather than accommodation. She was part of the team by design, not charity. The competition is in 5 days, Kira said, appearing beside them with Dex and Echo in tow. We need to start intensive training immediately. What followed were the most challenging and exhilarating days of Zara's academic career. The telepathy relay course was far more complex than anything they had practiced with, featuring obstacles that required split-second coordination and absolute trust between team members. The course was set up in the Academy's largest gymnasium, with barriers, elevated platforms, narrow passages, and precision targets arranged in a maze-like pattern. Team members would be blindfolded and connected only through mental communication, required to navigate from start to finish while collecting specific objects and solving spatial puzzles along the way. During their first practice session, the complexity nearly overwhelmed them. Dex, Kira, and Echo's telepathic voices created a chaotic mental chorus that made concentration difficult. Zara found herself struggling to maintain her role as coordinator while processing the flood of mental input. "This isn't working," she gasped after their third failed attempt. "There's too much mental noise. I can't distinguish between your individual communications. We need to develop a more structured communication protocol," Echo suggested. "Maybe assign specific types of information to each team member?" Dex nodded thoughtfully. "In traditional Mindari telepathic coordination, we use hierarchical information sorting. Zara could serve as the primary processing node, with each of us responsible for specific environmental data." They spent the next 2 days developing what they came to call their mental architecture. Kira would focus on immediate physical obstacles and navigation hazards. Echo would handle spatial positioning and distance calculations. Dex would monitor overall course progress and strategic decision-making. Zara would synthesize all their input and provide coordinated guidance to the team. The system worked beautifully once they learned to trust it. Zara discovered that her telekinetic awareness created a 3-dimensional map of their environment that perfectly complemented the telepathic information streams. She could sense obstacles, distances, and spatial relationships with precision that enhanced rather than conflicted with her teammates' mental communications. By their 4th day of practice, they were navigating the course with fluid efficiency. Zara had never experienced anything like the mental synchronization they achieved. It was as if her consciousness had expanded to include 3 other perspectives, creating a collective awareness that was greater than the sum of its parts. Word of their progress began to spread through the academy. Students would gather to watch their practice sessions, marveling at the seamless coordination between 4 very different minds. Even some faculty members began attending, taking notes on their collaborative techniques. But with increased attention came increased pressure. Zara knew that their performance would be seen as a test case for non-traditional approaches to competition. If they failed, it would reinforce the belief that standard methods were superior. If they succeeded, it might open doors for other students who didn't fit conventional athletic molds. The night before the competition, Zara lay in her dormitory room staring at the ceiling and fighting waves of anxiety. Everything they had worked for would be decided in the next day's performance. She had gone from being the excluded outsider to being the focal point of an experiment that could change how the academy approached collaborative competition. A soft chime from her door announced a visitor. She opened it to find Marcus standing in the hallway with a thermos of tea and a reassuring smile. "Thought you might be having trouble sleeping," he said, settling into the chair across from her bed. "Pre-competition nerves?" "More like pre-validation anxiety," she admitted. "What if we've been fooling ourselves? What if our practice success doesn't translate to actual competition?" Marcus poured tea for both of them, the familiar ritual somehow calming her nerves. "Do you remember what you told me about telekinetic precision during our first conversation? That I could maintain millimeter accuracy within 10 meters. Right. And in the weeks since then, I've watched you consistently demonstrate abilities that exceed what most people thought possible. Your problem isn't lack of capability, Zara. It's lack of confidence in your own worth." His words hit closer to home than she was comfortable with. "It's not that simple, Marcus. I've spent months being treated as if my abilities were worthless. It's hard to suddenly believe they're valuable. I understand that. But tomorrow isn't about proving yourself to people who already made up their minds about you. It's about demonstrating what's possible when different kinds of minds work together effectively." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. sipping tea and watching the stars through her dormitory window. Finally, Marcus spoke again. "Can I tell you something about human philosophy?" Zara nodded, curious where he was heading. "We have this concept called hybrid vigor. It's the idea that organisms with diverse genetic backgrounds are often stronger and more adaptable than those from homogeneous lines. I think the same principle applies to teams and collaboration. You're saying that our differences make us stronger rather than weaker? I'm saying that tomorrow, you're going to help prove that diversity isn't just politically correct theory. It's practically superior strategy." Marcus stood up, collecting the empty teacups. "Get some sleep, Anchor. Your team is counting on you to hold us all together." After he left, Zara found that her anxiety had transformed into something else: determination. Whatever happened tomorrow, she would give her absolute best effort, not to prove her worth to skeptics, but to honor the trust her teammates had placed in her. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she fell asleep feeling truly ready for a physical education challenge. The Academy Olympics opening ceremony filled the main arena with representatives from every species in the Galactic Educational Exchange Program. Zara had never seen so many different beings gathered in one place, their varied physiologies creating a tapestry of diversity that was both beautiful and slightly overwhelming. She sat with her telepathy relay team in the designated competitor section, trying to calm her nerves by focusing on the various cultural performances taking place on the arena floor. Kira's crystalline features reflected the stage lights in shifting patterns of color, while Dex maintained the serene expression typical of his telepathic species. Echo seemed as nervous as Zara felt, his human emotions clearly visible despite his attempts at composure. "The telepathy relay will be the third event of the day," Coach Tremor announced over the arena's communication system. "Teams should report to the preparation area 1 hour before their scheduled time." Around them, other students were engaged in animated discussions about their chances in various events. Zara noticed several groups glancing in their direction, with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. The attention made her self-conscious, but she tried to remember Marcus's words about proving what was possible, rather than defending her worth. "How are you feeling about the mental architecture we developed?" Dex asked quietly, his telepathic voice carrying undertones of calm confidence. "Stable," Zara replied, testing her mental state. "The information streams are clear and distinct. I should be able to process input from all three of you without interference." "Good," Echo added. "I've been monitoring the other teams during their practice sessions. Their coordination is impressive, but they're using traditional telepathic networks, linear communication between minds rather than the hub-and-spoke system we developed." Kira leaned forward with interest. "You think our approach gives us an advantage?" "I think our approach gives us a different set of strengths and weaknesses," Echo replied carefully. "Traditional networks are faster for simple communication, but can become overloaded during complex situations. Our system routes everything through Zara's processing, which might be slower but should be more stable under pressure." The analysis was both reassuring and terrifying. Their entire strategy depended on Zara's ability to serve as the mental focal point for 3 other consciousness streams. If she faltered or became overwhelmed, the entire team would collapse. An hour before their event, they made their way to the preparation area behind the main arena. The space was filled with other telepathy relay teams running through final practice drills and mental warm-up exercises. Zara could feel the psychic energy radiating from so many active telepathic minds, creating an atmosphere that was almost tangible. Their main competition appeared to be a team from the Advanced Placement Program, consisting of 3 Mindari students and a Zentaurian anchor. The Mindari were widely considered the most naturally gifted telepaths in known space, while Zentaurians possessed innate mental shielding abilities that made them ideal coordinators for telepathic networks. "They're good," Dex admitted, observing the opposing team's practice session. "Very traditional approach, but extremely well executed. Their coordination is almost seamless." Zara watched the rival team navigate a practice obstacle with fluid precision. Their movements were synchronized to a degree that seemed almost choreographed, each member anticipating the other's actions before they occurred. It was exactly the kind of natural telepathic harmony that her own team couldn't match. "We're not trying to beat them at their own game," she reminded herself as much as her teammates. "We're trying to prove that a different approach can be equally effective." They spent their remaining preparation time running through their mental protocols, and ensuring that each team member's role was clearly defined. Zara practiced filtering and processing multiple information streams while maintaining her telekinetic awareness of the surrounding environment. The familiar sensation of expanded consciousness helped calm her nerves. When their time came, they were led into the main arena where the telepathy relay course had been set up. The obstacle configuration was more complex than anything they had practiced with, featuring elevated platforms, narrow passages, rotating barriers, and precision targets that required exact coordination to navigate successfully. The arena was packed with spectators, their voices creating a low rumble of anticipation. Zara caught sight of Marcus in the competitor section, giving her an encouraging thumbs-up gesture. Other familiar faces from their physical education classes were scattered throughout the crowd, some clearly rooting for their success while others seemed to be waiting for them to fail. "Competitors, please take your positions at the starting line," announced the event coordinator. 6 teams lined up across the arena floor, each consisting of 4 members who would soon be blindfolded and dependent entirely on mental communication. Zara felt the familiar pre-competition adrenaline surge, but this time it was accompanied by something new, genuine confidence in her team's preparation. The blindfolds were secured, plunging them into complete darkness. Immediately, Zara felt the mental connections activating as her teammates established their telepathic links. The sensation was like having 3 additional sets of senses suddenly becoming available to her consciousness. "Mental architecture stable," she reported through the team link. "All information streams clear and distinct." "Environmental scan active," Kira responded, her telepathic voice carrying spatial awareness data. "Distance calculations online," Echo added, providing precise measurements of obstacles and pathways. "Strategic overview established," Dex concluded, offering tactical assessment of their route through the course. The event coordinator's whistle pierced the arena silence, and 6 teams began their blind navigation of the complex obstacle course. Zara immediately felt the difference between their approach and traditional telepathic coordination. Instead of the chaotic chorus of multiple minds communicating simultaneously, her teammates' input arrived as organized data streams that she could process and synthesize into coherent guidance. "Forward 3 meters, then slight left turn to avoid barrier," she directed, translating Kira's spatial awareness into movement instructions. "Elevated platform ahead. Requires synchronized climbing," she continued, incorporating Echo's distance calculations into strategic planning. "Alternative route available through narrow passage to the right," she concluded, using Dex's tactical analysis to optimize their path. Their progress through the course felt different from practice sessions. The pressure of competition and the complexity of the obstacles created mental stress that tested their coordination protocols in new ways. But the architecture they had developed proved robust under pressure, allowing them to maintain clear communication even during challenging sequences. Around them, Zara could sense the other teams struggling with different aspects of the course. Some moved with impressive speed but lacked precision, while others maintained perfect coordination but sacrificed momentum. Their own approach seemed to strike a balance between speed and accuracy that kept them competitive without forcing risky decisions. The final section of the course required threading through a series of hanging rings while carrying a delicate crystal, formation that would shatter if dropped or handled roughly. It was exactly the kind of precision challenge that played to Zara's telekinetic strengths. "I can maintain contact with the crystal through telekinetic awareness," she told her teammates. "Even if we lose physical grip, I can prevent it from falling." The strategy worked perfectly. While other teams slowed down dramatically to ensure they didn't drop their crystals, Zara's team maintained speed while using her abilities as a safety net. They crossed the finish line in what felt like a blur of coordinated movement and shared consciousness. Only when the blindfolds were removed did they realize they had placed first, with a time that set a new academy record for the telepathy relay event. The victory celebration that erupted in the arena was unlike anything Zara had ever experienced. Students who had spent months treating her as invisible were now cheering her name alongside her teammates. The sound washed over her in waves, creating a surreal contrast to the isolation she had felt just weeks earlier. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications," the event announcer's voice boomed over the crowd noise. "We have witnessed something truly extraordinary today. The telepathy relay team consisting of Dex Mindaris, Kira Zalarian, Echo Martinez, and anchor Zara Nithis has not only won their event, but established a new academy record in the process. As they stood on the victory platform, Zara found herself struggling to process the reality of the moment. The gold medal hanging around her neck felt impossibly heavy and light at the same time. When she looked out at the crowd, she saw faces that reflected genuine admiration, rather than pity or dismissal. Dr. Yilan, the xenobiology professor, approached them during the medal ceremony with an expression of professional fascination. Your coordination method represents a significant breakthrough in understanding how different neural architectures can complement rather than conflict with each other, she told Zara directly. I would very much like to study your techniques for potential application in other collaborative contexts. The implications of her words began to sink in as other faculty members joined the conversation. Their victory wasn't being seen as a lucky accident or clever rule interpretation, but as a legitimate innovation in interspecies cooperation. The applications for this kind of hybrid mental coordination could extend far beyond athletics, Professor Chen added, his expertise in interstellar diplomacy evident in his analysis. Imagine negotiation teams that combined different cognitive approaches, or research groups that merged telepathic and telekinetic awareness for complex problem solving. Over the following days, the attention became almost overwhelming. Students who had never spoken to Zara were now approaching her for advice on collaborative techniques. Faculty members invited her to participate in research projects exploring the boundaries between different mental abilities. Even students from other academy stations began reaching out through interstellar communication channels, wanting to learn about their coordination methods, but perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. 3 days after the Olympics, Vex approached her in the cafeteria with an expression that seemed genuinely humble. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble, settling into the seat across from her. I spent months treating you like you didn't belong here, and it turns out you were developing capabilities that none of us understood. Zara set down her nutrition supplement, studying his face for signs of insincerity. What changed your mind? Watching your team work together made me realize that I've been thinking about competition all wrong, he replied. I was so focused on individual superiority that I missed the point of why we're all here in the first place, which is learning how to work with beings who are different from us. The galaxy isn't populated by identical species competing for dominance. It's filled with diverse civilizations that need to find ways to cooperate effectively. Vex's scaled features shifted into what might have been a rueful smile. Your team proved that differences can be sources of strength, rather than obstacles to overcome. The conversation marked a turning point in how Zara was perceived throughout the academy. Students who had previously categorized her as disabled began to understand that she simply possessed a different kind of ability that required different applications. The distinction transformed not only her social experiences, but her own self-perception. Marcus found her that evening in the Academy's observation deck, staring out at the stars through the massive viewport that dominated one wall. He settled beside her on the cushioned bench, following her gaze toward the distant pinpoints of light that represented homeworlds for dozens of different species. Regrets? He asked quietly. About what? Spending months thinking you didn't belong here when you were actually exactly what this place needed. Zara considered the question seriously. I think I needed those months of struggle to develop the motivation to find creative solutions. If acceptance had come easily, I might never have learned to value my differences as strengths. Very philosophical, Marcus observed with a smile. Also very human-like thinking. We tend to believe that challenges make us stronger. Is that why you helped me? Because humans see value in overcoming obstacles. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars shift slowly across the viewport. I helped you because I recognized something familiar in your situation. Humans haven't always been accepted in galactic civilization either. We were seen as too aggressive, too unpredictable, too different from established norms. And now? Now we're valued for exactly those differences that once made us outsiders. Our unpredictability became useful for solving problems that conventional thinking couldn't address. Our aggression transformed into determination that drives innovation and exploration. Zara felt a deep understanding settle over her as she grasped the parallel he was drawing. You saw that my situation might follow a similar, pattern, I saw that someone who had been forced to think differently about basic challenges might have unique insights to offer. When those thinking patterns were properly valued, they sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the star field rotate slowly as the Academy station maintained its orbital position. Finally, Zara spoke again. What happens now? I mean, beyond the immediate attention and recognition, do you think this changes anything fundamental about how the Academy approaches education? I think it opens doors, Marcus replied. Not just for you, but for other students who don't fit standard models of capability. Your success proves that different approaches can be as valid as traditional methods. And if other students want to form collaborative teams similar to ours, then they'll have a precedent to point to. Change in educational institutions happens slowly, but it does happen when results demonstrate clear benefits. 6 months later, the Academy had formally incorporated collaborative team options into its physical education curriculum. Students could now choose between individual competition and group coordination approaches, with both methods receiving equal recognition and support. Zara found herself serving as a mentor for other students who were struggling to find their place in the Academy's social and academic structure. She helped form mixed ability teams for various challenges, developed training protocols for interspecies coordination, and gradually built a reputation as someone who could help diverse groups work effectively together. The transformation was remarkable not just in terms of her own experience, but in terms of what it revealed about the potential for innovation when different perspectives were valued rather than merely tolerated. The Academy had always prided itself on diversity, but Zara's story demonstrated the difference between accepting differences and actively leveraging them for enhanced capability. As she stood once again at the observation deck viewport, now surrounded by a diverse group of students who had come to her for guidance on their own collaborative projects, Zara reflected on how completely her understanding of belonging had evolved. She had arrived at the Academy believing that acceptance required conformity to existing standards. Instead, she had discovered that true belonging came from finding ways to contribute her unique capabilities to shared objectives. The stars outside the viewport seemed brighter now, representing not distant and unreachable destinations, but potential opportunities for the kind of interspecies cooperation that had transformed her from an outsider into a valued leader. In learning to value her own differences, she had helped create space for others to discover the strength in their own unique perspectives. The limbless alien, girl who had once been laughed at in PE class, had become proof that the galaxy's greatest strength lay not in uniformity, but in the creative potential that emerged when diverse minds learned to work together as one.